Well, to go through the papers this morning, I'm delighted to be joined now by political correspondent at The Spectator, James Heal. James, lovely to see you on this sunny Sunday. So let's discuss the aftermath of the riots. Sunday Times has published a piece by Rod Liddle, who's from Middlesbrough. I just found this a compelling read because he's trying to look at the reasons why this happened. And he puts a lot of it down to football hooliganism, and I think there are some thuggish groups that have been coordinated some of this action. He talks about the issue of two-tier policing, but he also says that a lot of people in his town where he grew up feel ignored, they feel left behind, and they feel resentful. I mean, it's an explanation. It's not a justification for violence, but it's an explanation, James.
Yeah, I mean, after a week of unrest and now with order restored, thankfully, it's almost now the sort of trickier task of kind of working out what are the reasons for this unrest, these riots, these disturbances? And those are much more thorny and difficult questions. Interestingly, of course, you say Rod Liddle has been sent by the Sunday Times to Middlesbrough. Elsewhere, The Observer has also sent a journalist there, and they both come up with different pieces and different responses. Which
and The Observer saying what? It's all the Tories' fault?
Much more of that, yes. And so I think that these are very difficult, complex questions. I mean, of course, in The Observer, their headline is "People Just Like Rioting." And I mean, to a certain extent, you know, I think every 10 to 15 years we do have riots for different reasons, etc. Yeah. The key thing, of course, is the nature of those do change each time. I'm really struck in Rod Liddle's report as well by the fact that Middlesbrough has 1 in 200 residents there is a resettled asylum seeker. Yes. So that's the highest amount in any kind of area in the UK, and that is perhaps one potentially exacerbating factor, because as he points out, this is an area with traditionally high Irish immigration into the area, and that's why they've got a big, fantastic local Catholic church there. So I think these are really kind of interesting questions, and we're only just getting to grips now with kind of why the riots swept Britain and why they affected some of the most deprived areas in the country as well.
Also, there's this idea that although we're getting swift justice, is Keir Starmer actually grasping the nettle when it comes to giving us solutions to the problems of the lack of integration in some of these communities, particularly in the north?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what he's going to really struggle with. I mean, he is obviously former Director of Public Prosecutions. He's someone who's a process man. In some ways, that is the easy bit, to call for people to be locked up. And of course, as the Observer report notes, the verdicts we've had so far are the ones where people plead guilty quickly. So they're the easiest ones to process and get them through. The much more thornier ones, when it comes down to identification, whether they're pleading not guilty or whatever, that'll take much longer. And then, of course, there's the issues around sort of a much bigger justice backlog. So I think that these are really difficult ones. And I think the biggest criticism I've heard about Keir Starmer, which rings most true, is the kind of failure of political imagination. He's good at responding to events. He's good as a kind of tactician and a strategist. But actually kind of coming up with a big vision and sort of uniting the country behind that will be a much more difficult challenge, and the one he's got to grasp with over the next 5 years.
Also, I think it's interesting to read the story in the Sunday Telegraph suggesting that Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, wants to lift restrictions on social housing for migrants. So just to explain this, the Tories had suggested that the priority for social housing should go to people with British citizenship, and that migrants should basically be put further down the list. Yeah. Now Rayner is saying that that should be reversed. But isn't it those sorts of policies that create some of this division in communities?
I'd say so, certainly. I think this was about a change the government planning to introduce. Michael Gove introduced this idea in January of a UK connection test. So either, as you say, a British citizen or someone who'd been here for at least 10 years. And then this was obviously going to be, address the unfairness that someone arrives here shouldn't be able to claim housing straight away. And yet, within a couple of weeks coming to office, Angela Rayner, who now is in charge of that local government department, has decided to lift that cap. And looking at the response in the paper, which the department has given to the paper, the Sunday Telegraph, it only says that, 90% of housing does go to people who've been here 10 years or more, or British residents. I think, well, that doesn't address the fundamental unfairness, which is that people feel as though there's one rule for them and one rule for someone else. So I think that these are the kind of things that do feed those grievances. I'm interested in the Sunday Times. There's a line that says that Morgan McSweeney, who, of course, is the great political thinker, the strategist, the Dominic Cummings behind Keir Starmer.
We're going to get on to him in a minute. His tensions with Sue Gray, but
absolutely, yes. I mean, there's a line that he wants to be tough on populism and tough on the causes of populism. And there's a borrow from the Blair line.
I don't get this whole criticism of populism. I mean, the thing about populism is it is quite popular with the electorate.
Yes.
You know, things like social housing for people with British citizenship ahead of those who may have arrived here by dubious means. I mean, it's a pretty successful policy for whoever tables it. What surprises me about Angela Rayner is if there's anyone in that cabinet that could stand up for the so-called left behinds. Again, this is not a justification of any of the violence that's taken place. But if we have people who are white working class who feel that they are left behind, ignored, forgotten and not heard, who better in that cabinet than Angela Rayner to appeal to them, and yet she's been silent on all this.
Absolutely, and I think that you've got to remember, of course, 2019, when all these red wall areas abandoned Labour in droves. I think Reform came second in 90 of these seats, so I think they've got to be careful for that next time around.
Very much so. Fears of tax rises as the Chancellor is poised to boost the living wage by 4% in her first budget, according to the Sunday Telegraph. And we're also looking at a story in the Sunday Express which suggests that hiking death tax will send family businesses to the wall. So this is a suggestion that she is going to increase inheritance tax. I mean, we know who they aren't going to tax, James. They've said very clearly not going to tax working people. So no increase to national insurance or indeed income tax or VAT. However, she's got to have to find the money somewhere to give more pay rises, because they've already agreed to public sector pay rises, I think, going up to 5.2% or by 5.2%. And now this idea of boosting the living wage by 4%, which is brilliant. It sounds great if you're all for the worker, comrades. Not that great if you're running a small business.
No, it isn't, of course. And you've also got to consider the wider economy as well, which is that obviously if you're in the public sector, trade union, that's fantastic. But of course, it means that if you want to get more money, bang for your buck from public services, it's great, obviously, you're paying the money for the staff, but equally about what are the returns you're going to see on the investment. The more money that's put into public services, the concern is people are getting less and less in terms of what the NHS is delivering for them, what the different public services, what schools are delivering for them. So I think that there's a real concern about this. And as you say, how are you going to pay for this as well? Coming at a time, of course, of inflation possibly going up again by the end of the year, which is a really big difference, I think. You know, we can talk about Rishi Sunak's government. Rishi Sunak's government overwhelming priority was on inflation. It was a voteless recovery. We got inflation down from 11% down to 2%. And yet the danger is under Labour with these pay rises, which are very generous, of course. They could actually help fuel that going up again.
But do Labour not see pay rises as inflationary? They just see them as an overwhelmingly good thing because it's all for the worker. But is there any consideration for the consequences, not least for small and medium-sized businesses who, let's be honest, have had a terrible time during COVID? They've had 6% shaved off their profit margins with the increase to corporation tax. Do the public realise, I suppose, James, that if wages go up, if somebody working in your local cafe is suddenly put on 12 or 13 quid an hour, that the cost of a coffee is going to go from £3 to £5?
I hope so. I think it's incumbent on people to make that argument and point that out, and that offering free money is not the sort of panacea to people's problems. And it's incumbent, I think, that's why the Conservatives need to making that argument and raising those kind of points. Because the danger is obviously otherwise the Labour get a free hit and they seem to be sort of these magnificent people giving out all the free money.
Yeah, I know, giving out all this cash to the workers. But it's the people that employ the workers that make the wealth, you could argue. Do you know what? John Redwood is coming in, Thatcher's former economic advisor.
Who better to make that argument?
We'll go through all of that in just a moment after the paper review. Sue's in charge. Mail on Sunday front page. Love this by Glenn Owen, the political editor. Security chiefs are saying that the PM is being kept in the dark by his aide, Sue Gray. We're all familiar with Sue Gray because of her work on Partygate. She's now Keir Starmer's chief of staff, but it seems as if she might be throwing her weight around. We've seen this before, James.
Yes.
What is it with people needing to be close to the Prime Minister? Apparently she's been moving Morgan McSweeney's desk around so he's not close and she's close. Everybody fighting for Keir Starmer's ear. It was ever thus.
It was ever thus. And Keir Starmer came in, his first speech out to Number 10, will have a politics that treads a little less lightly on your life. That remains to be seen, shall we say, because I think, as ever with Downing Street, there's all these rows going on and everyone's jockeying for influence right now. Some of this was ever thus, but the interesting thing with Sue Gray, of course, is that she was the ultimate machine career servant, civil servant. She knew the entirety of Whitehall inside and out. And so it was a fascinating decision by Keir Starmer to take her into government. And the danger is, of course, according to these reports, is that perhaps she knows how to outwit the Prime Minister, a bit like, Sir Humphrey and all the rest of it.
There's this idea, there's a quote in the piece, she's the one really running the country. Is she, though? And what about Simon Case? There's tension there with the Cabinet Secretary.
Well, this is the whole historic beef that comes up, which is that, according to reports, Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, blocked her from being the permanent secretary at the Department for Business. As a result of that, she then became chief of staff to the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer. Now Keir Starmer's become Prime Minister. It looks as though Simon Case is not going to be with us in a few months' time, according to various reports. And there'll be a new Cabinet Secretary. And, of course, that's the real crux, I think, of this story, which is that who will be the top civil servant in Britain. I suspect the hand of Sue Gray will certainly be involved in some capacity.
I think that we can be sure of that. And then let's finish, because the Olympics are coming to a close. It's been a thoroughly brilliant couple of weeks, and actually a welcome distraction is sort of the best of British on display in Paris and the worst on display in
some
of these.
Yes,
such a it's very, very, very much roles reversed. Yeah, we've been behaving like the French. But this wonderful story about Georgia Bell, we know her dad because we work with Andy Bell, who's the political editor of Channel 5. Lovely, lovely chap. But what's amazing about Georgia Bell winning this bronze medal in the 1500 is she basically was working in cyber tech. She had been a youth runner and very successful as a teenager, plagued by injury. She does a park run. She turns in this amazing... Have you ever done a park run, James?
No, I haven't.
Well, I tell you what, to do a park run in 16 minutes, which is what she cleared that 5K in, I think I can just about manage to scrape just under 30 minutes. So that's how good she is. And now she's a medalist and she's 30 years old and it's just a wonderful story.
It's a wonderful story. If you watch the race as well, obviously, she was in fourth for most of it and came up and just amazing last burst over the line. And I was so delighted for her and her family as well. And, I think last time she was watching the Olympics at home and during Tokyo and COVID and, as you say, decided to start running again and picked it up. And at the age of 30 to do that is a phenomenal result. And I'm so happy for her and her father as well.
If she can move up the podium in 4 years' time at the age of 34, we shall be in awe of her.
Absolutely.
James, thanks so much. You're going to stay around because we're going to have an interview that Olivia Rutley's doing with the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, and then you and John Redwood are going to analyse that a little later. But for now, thank you very much indeed.